I'd love to talk a bit about that. The roll-up, like Vitalik's blog post, basically. The roll-up centric multi-chain future, or the true multi-chain with bridges. Like, does the wormhole hack or exploit give additional credibility to Vitalik's thesis, or do you still see a world where people are jumping from Harmony to Luna to Solana to like chains that don't exist yet, and then maybe to Cardano?
So one thing out of the gates was, this was a smart contract bug, right? This exists on single chain applications, much like it does on multi-chain applications, much like it does on cross-chain bridges and roll-up bridges and any other bridge, right? This is just a problem in the implementation of things. Like, this same bug could have drained all the funds from Uniswap if it existed, as an hypothetical, because it just wasn't sanitizing the inputs correctly as part of an action. As part of like the conversation, like more broadly, is like, you got to consider things final at some point, right? Like, you got to have like finality in blockchains at some point. Like, you talked about Solana Pay. When you're making a payment, when you're depositing funds to and from an exchange, when you're hedging a trade on from a DEX, when you're like paying somebody ETH USDC for your Polkadot SAF round, like, those are all like, I don't know, cross-chain interactions. And, they become increasingly more complex, and they create this web of interactions over time. And, a roll-up centric approach where all of global commerce settles down to ETH1 has better trust assumptions, but, misses on all the other human stuff. And so, trust assumptions aren't everything. There's going to be dozens of compute environments out there that continue to like build on value, and that people inherently have to consider final in some form or the other. And so, they will continue to build their own competitive advantages, and those competitive advantages will then compose well with competitive advantages from other chains, and bridges will help do that, right? Like invoking contract calls, assets, NFTs, whatever it is, moving your apes to Ethereum to go to a bigger audience, and moving USD as a collateralized value, and all the other creative shit that I'm not thinking of right now. And so, very optimistic on a multi-chain future from a highly pragmatic lens, in my view. And if you guys have other views, I'd love to hear it. But
I think get back to the justification for plugging the gap on Wormhole hack. It was part of that conviction, I presume, because the whole point in Wormhole seems to be connectivity between all of these things. So that's you essentially putting money where your mouth is. Where your mouth is on this idea that connectivity between all of these means that all of these are going to stick around in some form or fashion.
Yeah, they're going to stick around, and that infrastructure like Wormhole is going to be critically important and capture a big chunk of that value in the market. So yeah, definitely a big bet on that.
Can you express like how's Wormhole fit in amongst the kind of the competitive landscape and like various trade-offs that can exist, whether that's centralization or dependencies on with oracles or whatever else. I don't really know how it works, but I know there's these different solutions. There's everybody's favorite bag. We don't need to name them, but like give the case for Wormhole versus other attempts at solving similar problems.
Yeah, so Wormhole, it's got these 19 guardians. You need 2/3 of the guardians to do something. It's not a centralized bridge. Jump's not running it, but you need 2/3 of these guardians to do something, right? There's these other like light client based bridges, which definitely do have better trust assumptions, more theoretically, because you're able to validate the chain, you're able to process all the headers, you're kind of be able to do things in a more pure fashion. When you have a chain like Solana that produces that much stuff, like it's hard to build a light client for it effectively. And so a chain like Ethereum or basically any other chain can't process that. And so you can't connect it using these things. There are like efforts on fancier cryptography and cooler shit to make that possible. And the way Wormhole is designed is to like take out like every piece is like highly modular, right? And so like if a better mechanism for like establishing trust and for like verifying an action on a chain comes into place, like you can swap out like this 2/3 thing and you can stick that in instead. But it's a highly pragmatic approach at getting it going. It takes a lot of being out there in the market, iterating and like responding to what people want to build a good product. And a lot of those components will continue to keep building, and things can get swapped out, right? The IBC type solutions are great. I think IBC is a very strong protocol, but it does require this light client thing that's not possible yet. There's the roll-up bridges, but those only work back to L1, and so those are, those are good, and they have good trust assumptions and better trust assumptions than wormhole has from those chains to the R2s, because there's dispute resolution, and that's kind of like a I think broadish picture of the solution space.
For better or for worse, it seems like one of the ones that, and maybe I could be wrong, I'm missing some, but like I recall like the Avalanche bridge, right? I think it's just a multi-sig or something. So there's a lot of trust assumptions, but there's not a lot of technology involved. So just moving that money back and forth is relatively straightforward as long as you trust those people. Do you think in the long term we'll get there from a security perspective to say like, okay, wormhole or what other solutions, whoever wins, or if there's multiple winners, even better, that will be clearly and obviously better than kind of these trusted but kind of low tech solutions?
Yes, kind of as a one-line answer. But a lot of the bridges that are like out there today are all basically effectively threshold signatures of some sort. So I think the AVAX one is like 2 of 3. Polygon's probably about the same, with some commits back to Ethereum for extra security. Wormhole's got 19. There's others that have similar kind of, I think, thresholds. I think as like cryptography like advances and we're able to do some of this like client proofs faster, like I think we will have better tech. There is a lot to be said for simplicity though, and I think that's kind of like what you were hinting on there. Like in more lines of code means more exploits, right? Like the wormhole exploit wasn't a problem in its trust assumption, right? Like no one there's nothing inherently wrong with the architecture of the bridge that caused this money to go away. It was a smart contract bug. And as you write more complex bridges, there's more lines of code and there's more possibilities for exploits. And so a lot of this will come through the fire. But like a big core principle that I think all good bridges have kind of been following is in minimizing the lines of code to make it as simple as possible.
UpOnly.